Hi everyone. So today we are diving into chapter 7, the process strategy. So now you might be wondering, what exactly is process strategy? Now think of it as the backbone of any organization. So it is how companies decide the best way to transform their resources into the products and services you use every day. Okay? So whether it is the coffee shop making your morning latte or Boeing building aircraft, every organization faces this critical decision. How do we actually make what we sell? So that choice shapes everything from costs to quality to customer satisfaction. Alright, so let us see our roadmap for today. Now, by the end of this chapter, you will be able to do three key things. Okay, first, you will describe the four main process strategies that company use. Now, I'd like you to think McDonald's versus a custom furniture maker. Okay, they operate very differently. Second, you will compute crossover points to help businesses decide when to switch from one process to another. Okay? Third, you will practice tools to analyze and improve processes. So these are not just theoretical concepts. These are real skills that operations managers use every single day, okay, to make critical decisions. So, what exactly is a process strategy? It is actually quite straightforward, okay? It is simply an organization's plan for how they are going to turn their resources like the raw materials, the labor, and equipment into products or services they sell to customers. So think of it as the how behind the what, okay? So every company has to make this fundamental choice. What is the best way for us to create value? Should we focus on flexibility, speed, cost, or quality? So this decision impacts everything from their layout to their workforce to their bottom line. So let us dive into our first learning objective, the four main process strategies that companies can choose from. Think of these as four different philosophies for how the organization operates. Okay? So each one represents a different balance between the volume and the variety. Okay? So some companies excel at making lots of identical products cheaply, while others specialize in creating unique, customized solutions. So the key here is matching your process strategy to what your customers actually want and what your business does best. Okay? So let us explore each of these four approaches. Okay, so here are our four process strategies, and I want you to think of them as a spectrum. Okay? At one end, we have process focus. Imagine a custom motorcycle shop where each bike is unique. Then repetitive focus like Harley Davidson's assembly line using standardized modules. Product focus is your, take note, high volume, low variety operations. Think of the Frito-Lay example we had. Frito-Lay churning out millions of identical bags of chips. And finally, the mass customization, the holy grail where companies like Dell give you both variety and efficiency. So each strategy has its sweet spot depending on what customer wants. So process focus is perfect for making small amounts of different custom products. Now notice the key phrase here. Each product is different and made to order. Okay? So this is exactly what process focus excels at. Handling a variety of custom orders in small quantities. Now, think about it, okay? When a customer walks into that furniture shop and says, I need a dining table that's exactly 7 feet long with a specific wood finish. So that's a one-off order. The shop organizes around different processes. Okay? Cutting process, sanding process, staining process. So rather than around specific products. So it is all about flexibility to handle whatever unique request comes through the door. Okay, so now the key to repetitive focus is actually using pre-made modules to assembly products like on an assembly line. So think of it as sophisticated Lego blocks, okay, for grown-ups. The modules, engines, transmissions, body panels, they are actually manufactured separately, often in high volumes to keep costs down. So then they come together on the assembly line where the workers repeatedly perform the same assembly tasks. Okay, so this approach gives you the efficiency of standardized processes while still allowing for product variations. Now, you can mix and match different modules in order to create different models of flowing through the same basic assembly process. Okay, so product focus is designed for making large amounts of the same standardized product. So this is where you see the ultimate in specialization and efficiency. Now everything in the facility is organized around producing that one product as efficiently as possible. The equipment is highly specialized as well. The workflow is optimized, and the workers, they become experts at their specific tasks. Okay? So think about how a paper mill actually runs 24/7, producing thousands of rolls of identical paper. So when you have predictable, high volume demand for a standard product, this approach delivers the lowest possible cost per unit. Okay, so mass customization is all about making customized products quickly and affordably at high volumes. So this is the ultimate challenge in operations management. How do you give each customer exactly what they want without sacrificing speed and or driving up costs, okay? Well, the secret lies in clever design and flexible processes. So companies that master this can respond to individual customer needs while maintaining the efficiency of mass production. So it requires sophisticated coordination between the design, manufacturing, and supply chain. But when it works, customers get personalized products at reasonable prices and fast delivery times. Okay, so this table right now is your roadmap to understanding when each process strategy actually makes sense. Okay, so kindly notice the clear patterns here. Now, as you move from process focus to product focus, you see a shift from high variety to high volume. So process focus needs broadly skilled operators who can actually handle anything, while product focus uses less skilled workers doing standardized tasks. Okay? So the inventory and scheduling complexity also change dramatically. Mass customization sits at the challenging end, okay, because it demands flexible operators, sophisticated scheduling, and the ability to handle custom orders efficiently. So this table actually shows you exactly why choosing the right process strategy is very critical. Okay, so why does Kapitan's Kitchen use repetitive focus? So let's look at the evidence, okay? So first, they produced a standardized product, okay, the bak choy, in relatively high volumes across multiple locations. Second, their process involves assembling pre-made components like the broth, the noodles, the toppings into a final product. So just like our assembly line example a while ago. And third, there is consistent demand for their product, allowing for steady production flow. And finally, while there is some customization possible with different toppings or variations, the core product remains largely the same. So this combination makes repetitive focus the perfect fit for their business model. So now, let us move to our second learning objective, the computing crossover points. So this is where the math meets real business decisions. A crossover point tells us exactly when it makes sense to switch from one process to another based on volume. So I want you to think of it as the break-even point between different production methods. So for example, when does it become cheaper to move from a job shop to an assembly line? Okay? So, or when should you invest in specialized equipment versus using general purpose machines? So these calculations help managers make data-driven decisions about their process strategy. So a crossover point is the number of products where the total cost of both methods is exactly the same. Now think of it as the tipping point, okay? Before this point, one method is cheaper, and after this point, the other method becomes cheaper. So let us use a simple coffee example, okay? So buying a coffee machine has a high starting cost, but take note, each cup after that is cheap. Going to a coffee shop has no starting cost, but each cup costs more. At some point, the total amounts you have spent on coffee shop drinks will equal the cost of machine plus homemade coffee. So that is your crossover point. Okay, so let us break down these two methods. Method A is what we call high fixed cost, low variable cost. Okay? You buy expensive machinery upfront. Maybe let's say $100,000. Okay, but then each product only costs you $2 to make. Now, method B is the opposite. Low fixed cost and high variable cost. You start with basic equipment of $10,000, but now each product actually costs you $8 to make. Now the question becomes, at what production volume does Method A's big upfront investment start paying off? So that will be your crossover point. Once you hit that certain number, Method A becomes the winner because those low per unit costs adds up to real savings. Okay? Now, let us work through a real example. The Clever Enterprises, okay, has actually 3 software options for their accounting processes. I want you to look at the numbers on your screen. Software A actually costs $200,000 upfront, but only $60 per report. Now, software B is $300,000 with $25 per report. And software C costs $400,000 but just $10 per report. Okay? So have you noticed the pattern? So higher fixed costs mean lower variable costs. So, question. Which one should they choose? Of course, it depends entirely on how many reports they will process. Okay? We need to find where these cost lines intersect. Okay? Because that intersection point is our crossover point. Okay, so now let's calculate when A becomes better than B and when C beats them both. Okay? Okay, so right now I want you to focus on my pointer on your screen right now. Okay? So let us walk through this crossover calculation together, following the 3 steps shown on your slide. So step 1, here it says, write the general formula for the total costs. So this will be your foundation total costs. Okay? This will be your foundation. So as you can see here, total cost equals fixed cost plus variable cost multiplied to x. Okay? Where, take note, your x is the number of reports. Simple enough, you have costs that do not change regardless of volume, plus costs that multiply with each unit you produce. Okay, so that is the first formula. The second formula is set up the equation for 2 systems. Okay, so here where it gets interesting. At the crossover point, total cost of both systems must be equal. Okay, you see it here. You see my pointer? Okay. At total costs of both the systems must be equal. So we write system 1 equals here system 1 equals system 2. So that gives us the next equation, FC1 plus VC1 multiplied to X is equal to FC2 plus VC2 times X. Okay, so we are basically saying at some volume X, both options cost the same total amount. So now let's proceed to step 3. Okay, so in step 3 is to solve for X using algebraic manipulation. Okay, now follow along as I work through this. Okay, first, this one, we transpose terms containing X to the left side of the equation. So that means, that means VC1 times X minus VC2, okay, here, times X equals FC2 minus FC1. Okay, second, so the next is we factor out X, giving us X times the quantity VC1 minus VC2 equals FC2 minus FC1. Okay, so finally we are here now in number 3. We transpose to isolate X. So X is equal to FC2 minus FC1 all divided by VC1 minus VC2. So this formula tells us exactly where the two cost lines cross. Okay, so it is the magic number that determines which process to choose. Okay, so now let us apply our formula to the clever example. Okay, so the approach section tells us to solve for the crossover point between software A and B first, then between software B and C. Okay, so let's start. Let's start with A versus B first. So using our formula, we set up 200,000 plus 60 multiplied to V1 is equal to 300,000 plus 25 multiplied to V1. Okay? So notice, I'm using V1 for volume instead of X. So this is just the same concept but different variable name. Okay? Now we solve step by step. So first, we subtract 25 V1 from both sides. Okay? So 200,000 plus 35 V1 is equal to 300,000. Okay, so next subtract 200,000 from both sides. So this derives to this formula. That's why we have this 35 V1 equals 100,000. Now finally, we divide both sides by 35. That is why we have V1 is equal to 2,857 reports. Okay, so what does this mean? So this means that software A is of course most economical from 0 reports up to 2,857 reports and then at exact exactly 2,857 reports, both software A and B costs the same. And beyond 2,857 reports, software B becomes cheaper because its lower variable cost per report starts to overcome its higher fixed cost. Okay? So this is the power of crossover analysis. It gives you the exact break-even point where your process choice should switch. Now, below 2,857 reports, if your volume is 2,857 reports, then you have to choose A. But if your volume is above than 2,857 reports, then you have to choose B. Okay, so now let us find the second crossover point between software B and C. We follow the same process. We set the cost of software B equal to the cost of software C. So that's why we write here 300,000 plus 25 times V2 is equal to 400,000 plus 10 times V2. So notice I am using V2 this time to represent our second crossover point, okay? So let us solve this step by step. So I will tell you how did we arrive here in the second equation, which is 15V2 is equal to 100,000. How? So first, we subtract 10V2 from both sides. So that equates to 300,000 plus 15V2 equals to 400,000. And then next, we subtract 300,000 from both sides. So that's why we have this equation. 15V2 equals 100,000. Okay? So finally, we divide both sides by 15. So V2 is equal to 6,666 reports. Now we can see the complete picture. Okay, software B is most economical when the number of reports fall between 2,857 and 6,666. So below 2,857, software A wins because of its lower fixed cost. Okay, so meaning above 6,666, software C becomes the best choice because its very low variable cost of $10 per report finally overcomes its high 400,000 fixed cost dollars. So this actually gives Kleber three distinct ranges. So A for low volume, B for medium volume, and C for high volume. So the crossover analysis tells them exactly where to make each switch. Okay, so now we're moving to learning objective 7.3, which is actually using the tools of process analysis. Now, I want you to think of this as your diagnostic instruments for understanding how work actually flows through your organization. So just like a doctor uses different tools to examine a patient, operations managers need specific tools to analyze processes. So we have 5 main tools in our toolkit: the flowcharts, the time function mapping, the process charts, the value stream mapping, and the service blueprinting. Okay, so each of these 5 tools gives us a different lens to examine our processes. So some actually focus on the big picture, others zoom in on details like time and waste. So these are not just academic exercises, okay? They are practical tools that help you identify bottlenecks, eliminate waste, and will, of course, improve customer satisfaction. Okay, so these process analysis tools serve 3 main purposes for businesses. The first one is they help spot problems. So those hidden bottlenecks and inefficiencies that eat away at your bottom line. Okay, so you might discover that customers are waiting too long at one step, or that paperwork is getting stuck somewhere in the system. Okay, so second, they help find ways to make things faster or even cheaper. So maybe you will realize those steps can be combined, or that you are moving materials back and forth unnecessarily. And then third, and most importantly, they improve the overall quality of your products and services. So when you understand exactly how work flows, you can design better processes that reduce errors and increase customer satisfaction. So think of these tools as your process improvement roadmap. So they show you where you are, where the problems exist, and how to get where you want to be. Okay, so let us look at our 5 process analysis tools. We have here flowcharts, time function mapping, process charts, value stream mapping, and the service blueprinting. Okay, so to make this practical, we will apply each tool to something you understand. Let's make a sandwich, a very delicious sandwich, okay? So a flow chart shows the basic steps from getting the bread, adding ingredients, cutting, serving. Okay, so your time function mapping, it adds the time element. So maybe it takes 30 seconds to get the bread, 2 minutes to add your ingredients, and so on. Then the process charts, it gets more detailed, tracking every moment, every movement, inspection, and delay. So the value stream mapping looks at the entire supply chain from wheat growing to your finished sandwich. And service blueprinting focuses on customer interaction, what the customer sees versus what happens behind the counter. Okay? So each tool gives you different insights. The flowchart shows the big picture. Time function mapping reveals the bottlenecks. The process charts actually identify the waste. The value stream mapping, it helps you connect suppliers to customers. And the last one is the service blueprinting. It improves customers' experience. Okay, so same sandwich process with 5 different analytical lenses. Okay, so let us dive deeper into each tool with our sandwich example. Okay, so first, your flowchart. So these are visual diagrams using symbols and arrows to map the sandwich assembly. To map the sandwich assembly process. So you would see triangles for actions like sliced bread and diamonds for decisions like adding tomato or mustard. Okay? Now the time function mapping, it documents the duration of each sandwich preparation activity. So you are tracking how time is utilized throughout the process. So maybe you spend 15 seconds for slicing, 45 seconds adding ingredients, 10 seconds cutting diagonally. So process charts give you detailed documentation of every individual step involved in sandwich creation. So this actually captures granular actions and movements. So walk to refrigerator, open door, reach for tomato, slice tomato, place on bread. So those things. Okay? Okay. So let us learn the language of flowcharts. Think of these shapes as your process vocabulary. Now, each shape has a specific meaning, just like road signs that tells drivers what to expect. So, just like that, the oval in the flowchart is actually your start or end marker. So, it indicates the beginning or end of a process. Now you will see start at the top of your flowchart and end at the bottom. Simple bookends for your process. So the rectangle is your workhorse, okay? It represents any step or action in the process. So whether it is to get bread, add condiments, or prepare a sandwich. So every action gets a rectangle. Now these are the doing steps. Now here is where it gets interesting. The diamond shows a decision point where the process splits into different paths. So think choose filling or cut sandwich. So these diamonds typically has two or more arrows coming out labeled with possible decisions like yes or no, or turkey, okay? So versus ham, okay? So the key is consistency. Now, once you pick these symbols, use them the same way throughout your flowchart. So this creates a visual language anyone can follow and understand your process flow. Okay, so we have three more flowchart shapes to cover. The next one is the parallelogram. So it actually represents the input or output from the process. So you think of it as anything coming into or going out of your system. So for example, enter customer order or brings information in while print receipt sends something out to the customer. Okay? So the document symbol, it is a rectangle with a wavy bottom. So it looks like a piece of paper. So which makes sense because it indicates a document or report is in the process. So you will use this for things like generate invoice or print menu, things like that. Anytime paperwork or reports are created, so this is your go-to symbol. And finally, we have the connector. So which is just a circle. So this one's really handy when when your flowchart gets complicated and spans multiple pages. So instead of drawing long arrows across pages, you put a numbered circle at the end of one section and the same numbered circle where it continues. So It is like saying continued on page 2, okay? But in flowchart language. So all of these symbols give you everything you need to map out any process clearly and professionally. So the key is using them consistently so anyone reading your flowchart understands exactly what is happening at each step. Okay, so let us finish up with these remaining flowchart symbols. Now we have the flow lines. Flow lines are your arrows. So they show the direction and order of steps in the process. So you always use arrows, not just lines, to clearly indicate direction. So think of them as your roadmap, guiding people through the process flow. So the next is the D shape, which indicates a wait or delay in the process. So this is where your things get stuck or need time to happen. So examples include like wait for order confirmation or allow bread to toast. So these delays are often where you will find opportunities for improvement. Now, the hexagon, it shows a preparatory step or modification in the process. Now, think like set up workstation or preheat oven. Okay, so these are the setup activities that need to happen before the main work begins. And finally is your cylinder, which represents a database or stored information. So you use this for customer database or inventory system, anywhere data is stored or retrieved from a system. Now remember, these symbols actually create a common language. So when someone sees your flowchart, they immediately understand what type of activity each shape represents. So this standardization makes your process maps much more professional and easier to follow. So now let us put it all together with these simple steps to create a flowchart. So first, you have to start with the oval, so the start shape. This is your entry point. And second, you use triangles for the main steps of your process. So these are your action items like you take order or prepare ingredients, okay, like that. Now third is use diamonds for any decision points where the process branches. So remember, decisions split your flow into two different paths, okay? And then two different paths. And then fourth, you connect all shapes with arrows to show process flow. So never leave shapes floating without clear direction. And then fifth is use the other shapes to discuss as needed for specific elements. Now you add parallelograms for inputs and outputs, D shapes for delays, hexagons for preparation steps, and cylinders for databases. So do not force these shapes if you do not need them. Keep it very simple, okay? And finally, end with the oval, okay? So it is an end shape to close your process. So this gives your flowchart clear boundaries. The beauty of this approach is that anyone can pick up your flowchart and follow the process from start to finish. So it becomes a communication tool, training document, and improvement roadmap all in one. Okay, so let us start with flowcharts. Now, the first tool in our process analysis toolkit, okay? So flowcharts are maps of a process. So think of them like a GPS for your operations. So they show you every step and decision point along the way. Now, the key benefit is that flowcharts help you see the whole process at a glance rather than getting lost in individual details. Okay, so look at our sandwich example. Imagine drawing a picture of all the steps in making a sandwich. So from getting the bread to putting it on a plate. So you'd start with, of course, get bread, then choose filling, add condiments, assemble layers, cut sandwich, and finally serve on plate. So each of the steps connects to the next with arrows, creating a visual roadmap. So this bird's eye view is very powerful because it reveals things you might miss when you are focused on individual tasks. You might discover unnecessary steps, so you see where delays happen, or you realize that some of the activities could be done in parallel instead of in sequence. So flowcharts turn invisible processes into visible roadmaps that everyone can understand and improve. Okay, so let's examine this flowchart here. Now notice how it captures the complete process flow. Now we have a starting point with start, then the diamond wherein it says choose filling, which actually creates a decision point that branches into parallel processes wherein you can add meat or go vegetarian. Okay, kindly follow my pointer. And then both paths merge at add condiments. Then we have another decision diamond wherein it asks us to cut the sandwich, and then it with yes leading here with yes leading to cut diagonally. Okay, and with no to leave whole. So both of these options converge at serve and end with a one that says here end. So this flowchart demonstrates how decisions create multiple pathways while maintaining process flow continuity. Okay, so now let us move to time function mapping. This is our second process analysis tool. Now, think of this as a flow chart with a clock added, with a clock or time added, okay? So it shows not just the steps, but how long each step takes. So this timing element is very crucial because it actually reveals where your process gets bogged down. So using our sandwich example, it is like timing yourself making that sandwich to see which parts take the longest. So maybe you discover that get bread takes 10 seconds, but choose filling takes 2 minutes because you are standing there deciding between turkey or ham. So add condiments might take like 30 seconds while cut sandwich takes just 15 seconds. So these time data transforms your understanding of the process. So you might find that decision making is your biggest time consumer, not the actual assembly work. Or you might discover that walking back and forth to get ingredients takes more time than the food preparation itself. So time function mapping turns invisible time drain time function mapping turns invisible time drains into visible opportunities for improvement. So it answers the critical question like where is time actually being spent versus where you think it is being spent. Okay, so here is our time function mapping in action. Okay, so notice how each step shows duration. So we have a start that takes 0 seconds, then get bread takes 10 seconds, then choose filling takes 5 seconds, and so on. And then the parallel paths here, which is to add meat and add veggies, wherein your add meat is 15 seconds and your add veggies is 20 seconds. So this timing actually reveals that choosing your filling and of course adding your ingredients, yeah, are your longest steps. So this shows where potential bottlenecks might occur. So having that known, so meaning you have to be very careful with these steps, because if there is a bottleneck, then this might delay your total process, where meaning this might delay your total process. So in this case, your sandwiches will be given to customers late, so that will make your customer very happy, and that makes your service unsatisfactory. So you really have to focus on the bottlenecks shown in this time function mapping. So our third tool is process charts. So these are more detailed than the flow charts. So while flow charts show the big picture, process charts zoom in on every single action. So they actually use symbols to show different types of actions, whether you are doing something, moving something, or waiting for something to happen. So think of it like writing down every tiny action in making a sandwich, including walking to the fridge or waiting to the toaster. So you would document, okay? So you would say like, walk 5 steps to refrigerator, open refrigerator door, reach for turkey, close door, walk back to counter, wait 2 minutes for bread to toast, and so on. So every movement, every pause, every action gets recorded. So this level of detail might seem excessive, but it reveals hidden waste. So you might discover you are making multiple trips to the fridge because you forgot items, or that waiting for the toaster is your biggest time drain. So process charts help identify non-value added activities. So those steps that don't actually improve your sandwich but consume time energy. So this granular view is essential for process improvement. Okay, so this is an example of a process chart. Okay, so let's see how to do this step by step. Now the first one is you have to define the process. So in this case, we define it as making a sandwich. Okay, the second one is you list the steps. So we have here the steps. So you break down the process into individual steps from start to finish or to end. Okay, now you determine or create chart columns. So in this case, we have here distance in feet, time in minutes, chart symbols. So these are your chart symbols and your process description. Okay. So next, we will assign symbols for each step. Assign the appropriate symbol. So these are the symbols that you have to take note. This symbol is for operation. This one is for transport. This one means inspection. This one means delay. And this one means storage. And then next, after writing the symbol, you estimate times and distances for each step. So you estimate the time it takes and the distance moved if applicable. Okay, so actually on the actual conduct of this one, you really need a timer, okay, to have an accurate record. And then next is you fill in the chart, okay, with these details. Enter the information for each step into the chart. So next is we will calculate the totals. Here, kindly focus on this one, the totals. So it sum up the distances and the times. And then we counted symbols. So let's count how many of each symbol type you used So in this case, we have 10, 5, 2, 2, 2, 1. So the 10 here is the operation, meaning how many these symbols appeared. So let's try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's why it's 10. Next, how many of this symbol appeared? So we have here 5. So how many? Where is that? Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, correct. And then next we have the inspect this symbol. How many times did it appear? So 1, 2. Okay. Next you have to delete. Let's check. This is the symbol. So let's count 1 delay. The other one is here. So 1, 2 delays. And then next we have the storage. So we have here the storage symbol. So yeah, it's 1. Okay. So this is how you do that. Okay, so next is the value stream mapping. So it takes a step back and looks at the whole picture. So where we are not just walking about making the sandwich in your kitchen. So we are actually following everything from when you buy ingredients at the store to storing them at home to the customer actually eating the sandwich. Okay, so it is like following the complete journey and asking where do we actually add value for the customer and where are we just creating waste along the way. Okay, so let's try. Okay, so this will be our value stream mapping for making a sandwich. So as you can see, we start the process by this weekly order forecast, then feeds into the supplier. So these represents the information flow that initiates the supply chain. Okay. So next, supplier to storage. So meaning the supplier sends ingredients to the storage. So it shows here that this takes 1 day as indicated by our arrow. Next, we have here the storage. So ingredients remain in storage for up to 7 days. So in the value stream mapping, it is really stated or shown here. So this indicates potential waste in inventory holding. Okay. And then the fourth one is the sandwich making process. So this is the large pink box representing the main production process. So you can really see. So it is triggered by 2 inputs. So the first one is the customer order. This one, kindly look at my cursor. And the second one is your daily production. Okay. And then the fifth one is inside, which is sandwich making. So you have order received here, which takes 1 minute. And then you retrieve ingredients, which actually takes 2 minutes. And then you assemble the sandwich, which is for 3 minutes. And then after that, you package your sandwich for 1 minute. And then before you serve your sandwich, of course, you have this quality check. So as you can see, the total time for sandwich making is 7 minutes. Okay, so that's the beauty of this value stream mapping. Now is your post-production, the sixth one. So the post-production is after that 7 minutes, this whole process of sandwich making, the sandwich then goes to the delivery. Okay, and then the delivery to the customer, which is assumed to be 5 to 15 minutes. So as you can see, it is really shown here from your weekly order forecast going to your customer. It is really a step-by-step process. So I would just like to highlight this information flows, okay? So the information flows, the first one is, I want you to notice here, okay? There is an information for your weekly order forecast going to your supplier. So as you can see, we used here a dotted line, okay? So it represents an information. Next is your customer order and your daily production schedule. So you are informing the sandwich making. So if you are relaying an information, so the line must be a dotted line. Okay, so that's it. To sum it up, this map visualizes the entire process from supply to customer delivery, highlighting time spent at each stage. So it helps identify areas of efficiency like the 7-minute production time and potential waste like the 7-day storage time. So allowing for process improvement analysis. Okay, so our final tool is the service blueprinting. And this one's special because it is designed specifically for services. So think of it like drawing a map of a restaurant experience that shows 3 different layers. So first, what the customer does. So they walk in, of course, order, wait, and eat. And second, what the waiter does, so that the customer can still see actually what is the waiter doing, taking orders, serving food, cleaning tables. And the third one is what is actually happening in the kitchen, so that in this part the customer never sees the kitchen is doing the preparation of ingredients, the cooking, and the plating of dishes. Okay, so this is actually an example of a service blueprint. Okay, so this blueprint helps visualize how the entire sandwich making service do work together. So from your here, follow my pointer, customer's initial order to the final delivery of the sandwich. Okay, so it shows how different parts you have. Here the customer, here the waiter, and the kitchen. They actually interact in order to complete the service. Okay, so you have here, please take note that these arrows connecting the areas show the flow of these arrows connecting the areas shows that there is a flow of communication and service. So the customer, this one, only makes decisions, about what they want, while the actual sandwich preparation really happens in the kitchen. So it really shows it really shows the decision making steps on the customer side. But these are just choices. Okay, take note, these are just the choices that the customer makes, not the actual sandwich making process. Okay, take note of that. So the kitchen is really the one who do the real work of prepping and assembling the sandwich. So I just want to consider for you to really visualize this service blueprint. I want you to consider yourself as ordering at a restaurant. So you choose what you want, but the kitchen makes it. Okay, so please take note that the service blueprint is divided into 3 main sections, okay, as I've said earlier. So the first one is the customer. It tells us what the customer does. The second one is the waiter. It tells us what the customer does. And the third one is, of course, is the kitchen. It tells us what happens in the kitchen. So in this one, the role of customer here is the customer starts by deciding to order. So it is represented by a start. Then they choose between a meat or a vegetarian. Here, they choose between a meat or vegetarian filling. And then they decide whether they want the sandwich here to be cut or not. And finally, of course, they receive and eat the sandwich. Okay? So let's focus now on the waiter's role. So the waiter takes the customer's order, including filling choice. So they pass this order, as you can see, look at my pointer, they pass this order to the kitchen. And of course, they ask the customer, look at here, about their cutting preferences, okay? And then once the sandwich is ready, they deliver it to the customer. Then let's go to the role in the kitchen. So in the role in the kitchen is they receive the order from the waiter, okay? They prepare the ingredients, including the getting the bread. They make the sandwich according to the order, which is adding meat or veggies and condiments. And after that, they handle any special requests like cutting the sandwich. So that's it. I want you to take note that the arrows show how actions in one area trigger actions in another. So for example, the customer's order triggers. So look at that. The customer's order triggers the waiter to place the order. And the waiter's order triggers the kitchen activities. Another one, the decision points, okay? Here, these are decision points, the diamond shapes. So it shows where the process can take different paths. So choosing between meat and vegetarian or deciding whether to cut the sandwich or not, okay? And deciding whether to cut the sandwich or not. Okay, so that's a wrap of our discussion on process strategy and analysis tools. So remember, whether you are calculating crossover points or mapping processes, these are not just theoretical concepts, okay? They are practical tools you will use as managers to make better decisions. So the crossover point analysis the crossover analysis helps you choose the right process based on volume. And the 5 analysis tools, it helps you improve whatever process you select. So you practice these calculations and try sketching out process maps for activities in your daily life. You will be surprised how much waste and inefficiency you can spot once you start looking. Okay? So on our next class, our topic will be to explore location strategies and see how where you place your operations do really affects costs, customer service, and competitive advantage. So keep thinking like operations managers, okay? I'll see you next time.